Okay, I'm going to be speaking as though I'm addressing the person that I disagree with because I feel like it's a little bit more rhetorically simple if I'm not relaying an argument through you, but rather at you. So I want to talk about the threat that the Republican Party poses to the United States of America. There are a couple of angles from which you can approach this, and the angle that you should use definitely depends on who you're talking to, right? Like, I would never believe, it would be arrogant to believe that you could just convince like a hardline Republican that they should change their vote or abstain or review their positions even just with a couple words presented to them in an argument. That's just it doesn't really work that way. But everyone can learn something from somebody, so maybe there's a correct ordering of words that can affect some people, and that's what I'm going to try to go for. We're going to hit straight down the median. We're gonna hit that clean center as best as we can. So with regards to what's happening right now, I don't know where you, the imaginary person who I am speaking to, where you stand on like basically any political issues. But I am going to approach you as though we do share one basic thing, which is a belief in democracy, right? So that doesn't mean that you and I believe that we have to go along with whatever the masses believe in. A good democracy has protection for minority values. 51% of the population should not be able to exercise unlimited, unrestrained, unchecked control over the 49% that disagree with them. But there are ways to account for this. Our Constitution allows us to account for this. The basic protections that the Constitution lays out are afforded to all Americans, whether or not they are in the majority or minority in the political process. So we should all believe in democracy. If you don't really have a right to this conversation, of course. If you don't believe in the value of democracy, you don't really have any moral standing to be making any claims about the validity of the Democrats or the Republicans because you're outside of the process. You have your own system. It's not one that I respect, so I don't care, really. But if you care about democracy, you should care about its preservation. And while there are a great many things I feel the Republicans do which are worthy of moral condemnation, right now the biggest concern is the threat to our democratic process. Because, of course, if a democratic process is bent till it breaks, you reach a point where it's very difficult for people, no matter what they believe, to change anything the government does. It's easy to make flippant comparisons to, like, say, Nazi Germany or whatever, but frankly, there are examples all throughout history of this happening all over the place. It's not at all uncommon. You can have democracies that are temporarily weakened by a strongman. You can have democracies fall seemingly irrevocably back into authoritarian rule. Hungary is a recent and prominent example in Eastern Europe. And there are common trends that tend to follow and precede these events. Usually, what happens is the existence of a threat, real or imagined, is used to justify the election and defense of a strongman who claims that they face threats as a political leader, which can only be amended by severe action being taken to ensure that they're in a position to continue to defend the country. This applies really well to Donald Trump, right? I mean, Donald Trump campaigned primarily on the promise that he would defend America against the many threats that faces, China, the wall, whatever. And most of his and Republican messaging for the past half decade or so, they've been about defending America against threats. The Democrats have been primarily constructive. The Republicans have been primarily defensive. When you look at a Biden speech, you hear him talk about, he's got some inventive plan how to address American energy independence or how to revitalize our infrastructure or whatever. It's boring, it's rote, it's dry, it's bureaucratic, it's uninteresting, it's lame. It's procedural, it's liberal, but it's, it's politics. What are you going to do? But you take a look at what Trump says in any given speech, and it is overwhelmingly, a fiery, attack on one of any number of things. Most recently, things that affect him, not so much America. A common sentiment promoted by Republicans is the idea that they, whoever they are, the Democrats, the New World Order, it does tend to change, but they aren't really after Trump, they're after Republicans, and that their attempts to go after Trump through impeachment or through the FBI investigation or through the Jan 6 investigation or whatever else are really just attempts to remove Trump so they can then go after Republicans. This doesn't really make sense, but it's a really effective rhetorical tactic at making Republicans kind of gullible because it leads you into believing that any criticism of Trump must necessarily be an existential threat against you, that they're all lead-ups to getting him out of the way. But they kind of, like, ignore the possibility that he's actually behaving in ways which justly warrant the treatment that he's been getting. In fact, I believe that the way he's behaved would warrant much harsher treatment, which I'll talk about in just a second, you know. If you're a rational person, your beliefs should always be falsifiable. That is to say, there should always be a way that a person could convince you out of the positions you hold. Again, if that's not the case, if you believe something that is just completely untouchable, like there's nothing, like no counter evidence that could be presented, you know, you're not really participating in politics. This is just religion by another name. And if your political beliefs are religiously oriented, if you just believe them because you believe them because you believe them, if there's nothing outside of that, it's a perfectly contained loop. Um, you're essentially, I mean, you're not really even a political decision maker at that point, even really a decision maker at all. You're just sort of a cog in a larger machine, you know, a reliable instrument that other people will use to your own ends. You're gullible, and you take pride in your gullibility. You know, you're a fool, you're a stooge. I mean, it sounds harsh, right? But, like, that's what you are, you know? Politicians, powerful people, love people they can get to believe them so fanatically that no evidence can convince them otherwise. Often people will delude themselves into thinking that, you know, there is some bit of evidence that could convince them, they just haven't encountered it yet. But they often do what's called moving the goalposts, which is they will they'll say, you know, okay, well, this thing is wrong unless this thing happens, but that thing won't happen. And then that thing does happen. And then they're like, okay, well, it didn't really happen like how I thought it would happen. So, yeah, still no. A good example of this was with Jan 6, right? So a lot of people on Trump's side were saying, like, okay, we know that he's been going on about the ballots for a while now, but it's not like this is going to turn violent. And then, of course, it did turn violent. And then they're like, okay, well, that's not what I meant, you know, even though the attack on the Capitol was like a really big and unprecedented thing, basically. They're like, okay, well, that's not what I meant. A lot of them claimed that Antifa initially were the ones who led the attack in the Capitol, which was obviously like a bald-faced lie. Though interesting that it was a bald-faced lie that a bunch of prominent Republicans felt perfectly comfortable repeating and insisting on until they randomly dropped that point and started addressing it in other ways. You know, people are often really delusional about the... Is it not bald-faced lie? Is it bold-faced lie? I always thought it was bald-faced lie. It is bald? It's both? Well, that's probably not true. I've heard people use both. Ah, chat being ableist yet again. Yes, my unconventional, you know, lexicon. They attack me. They hate me for who I am. They're not really after me, folks. They're after you. They just have to get through me first. Whatever. Yeah, like bald as in plain. Yeah, bald as in bear. Like bald-faced lie. I thought that's... Okay, whatever. Look, let me cut to it, okay? Um, all of the facts that we have at hand right now concerning the January 6th stuff and the behavior of Trump and the people around him indicates that they have no faith in or no belief in or just a callous disregard for democracy. They have demonstrably lied at virtually every stage of this. You know, it goes well beyond what we have in the January 6th committee, though, of course, you know, we've seen a lot of really devastating stuff from the January 6th committee. But I could reiterate the findings, but I guess I just have to ask, like, what is the limit exactly to what you think Trump's acceptable behavior is? If you don't think this is like a legitimate threat to democracy, what can you do to go beyond this point that isn't just him leading a military coup, like directly, you know, like what behavior would indicate to you that this is far enough that isn't him literally like live executing politicians? My honest belief, like I like the civility thing is bullshit. Honestly, I think like the true belief of a lot of Republicans is that they kind of want this to happen. You know, is that people in my audience? They say like, well, my parents believe this, or they aren't willing to accept that. They kind of want that, don't they? Democracy is a relatively new political experiment in its current form. Certainly, it's nowhere near as long lasting as we've seen monarchies, feudalist, theocratic governments. Uh, Democracies are not like the natural state of human political affairs. Authoritarianism is a much more common, much easier to default to system, and it's much easier to maintain as well. It requires less bureaucracy, it requires less civil upkeep, it requires less complexity, you know? Authoritarian governments are simple. And normally I would make it appeal morally to the values of people who live in this country to say, well, you know, maybe you value authoritarianism or don't care that much about democracy, but don't you understand that even if we lived in an authoritarian government, the values you care about are not the ones that would be acted upon? But I don't really think that works because genuinely, I think a lot of Republicans are just kind of looking for exactly what an authoritarian Republican government would do. I mean, you can try to convince them that like austere, deregulation is going to lead to the world being choked with smog, pollution flooding our rivers and ground, climate change worsening, but they don't really believe in pollution and they don't really believe in climate change, do they? Or if they do believe in climate change, they believe that it's a product of God's, preparation for the rapture, because fundamentalist Christians, of which there are tens of millions, almost all of whom are Republican, and aggressive voters, by the way, they believe that often climate change is caused by God. It's the lead into the final days, which they believe are coming soon. Um, you know, weird enough that I wasn't under the impression that the Bible described the rapture as something that God would sort of slowly turn the heat up on. I was under the impression that when the rapture happened, it would be a fairly distinctive thing, not a complex set of physically falsifiable and empirical processes that would build up over the course of many decades that scientists have been warning us about since the 60s. I didn't realize that, you know, the end times would be predicated by, I mean, you could say anything with that, right? Like, oh, the end times are coming because you stubbed your toe, because, you know, the suffering of man is a predicate to Jesus's return, and my stubbing my toe must be a sign from whatever you want to post hoc rationalize. From my perspective, you know, outside of religious justification, anyone who's blasé about the end of the world coming and will willfully obstruct climate change legislation by supporting politicians who are acting as though we deserve the effects of climate change is essentially a, you know, one part in a multi-million man scheme to end the world, and they should be treated as such. I mean, they, you know, mass murderers, really. Um, because that's always how mass murder happens, you know? A lot of people, their understanding of evil is very cartoonish. They think that a mass murderer is somebody who, like, personally kills a bunch of people. But generally, when we think of, like, historical mass murderers, we don't really think of that, do we? Adolf Hitler, wasn't in those death camps personally pulling the trigger on any weapons. Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot. These are people who are known as mass murderers because their political behavior facilitated large numbers of deaths. They didn't have to personally enact them. If that was the case, then always would the crime, always would the sentence fall upon the grunt, the people given the orders. But that's not how society works. You can try and convict as many low-level SS officers or soldiers as you want, but as long as the leaders who are employing them, continue to replace them, it doesn't really change anything systemically. And that's kind of what you are, right? I mean, that's what Republicans are, right? They're mass murderers. They just don't want to accept the logical extension of the policies that they support, you know? Like, they'll back politicians who say trans people shouldn't exist, or that the mention of gay stuff around children, like acknowledging gay people exist, is a kind of pedophilia, knowing fully well that pedophilia and the predation of children is something which we sometimes treat with jail time and sometimes treat with mass lynchings. The logical extension of these beliefs is the mass execution of, or at least arrest of, queer people, which is mass murder. And if you vote for that, and if you abet that process politically, that is participation in mass murder. They're just too cowardly to actually own up to it, aren't they? Right? That's like what they're doing with climate change. At least some of them have the excuse of believing that climate change genuinely isn't real, or that it really is some kind of Chinese plot to hamper our manufacturing capabilities, as though investing heavily in green energy a decade ago wouldn't have put us on top of the world in one of the newest and most vital sectors of manufacturing, as though we couldn't have literally revitalized American manufacturing by being leaders in green energy. We passed that one up. I guess China gets to beat us on that one too. Great. Thank you for that. America's doing great right now, manufacturing-wise. It's been doing so much better for our abstemiousness. Anyway, I guess, like, at the end of the day, I really do think that many Republicans are only going to be able to understand what part they've taken in history when they take the role of the German citizen shown the photos taken at Auschwitz-Birkenau. The people who lived in willful ignorance, who justified to themselves the disappearances and the SS officers going door to door because there was some greater purpose they felt legitimized it, and then the reality comes crashing back down right here when they see the mass graves. I really think most Republicans are at that stage. Maybe some aren't, There are a lot of independents who should be convinced to vote more fervently, if not for Democrats, at the very least against Republicans, and that's a pursuit worth taking on our front. But for the Republicans themselves, people think evil is so special, but we know from the Nuremberg trials it is so banal. That the evil people that we read about in history books are psychologically normal. The stuff that they do is just, legitimized and justified and rationalized through internal processes that you and I and everyone use to get through our regular day-to-day lives. The emotional and cognitive processes that people use to justify why it was acceptable to cut off somebody in traffic are the same that the Nazi officers used to justify shooting Jews in the back of the head at Auschwitz-Birkenau. They are the same basic biological processes taken to their limit through political systems that weaponize our capability for rationalization to certain political ends. There is nothing fundamentally different. It is only a matter of extent and the targets enacted upon. And because we are fundamentally talking about cognitive biases being exploited for political purposes, I'm not under the delusional impression that I can dispel cognitive biases, just by pointing them out. If it worked that way, then this would be much, much easier. Of course, it's not, This language, I don't think it's hyperbolic at all. It is certainly severe. If you're ever curious, though, if you ever, wonder, if you're a part of that process, you should probably ask yourself some basic questions about the ways in which you're participating in politics and the goals that you actually want to enact. Because I've noticed that a lot of people who I disagree with are one or two questions away from their ideology collapsing into a pile. For example, and I've talked to Republicans privately as well, off stream, I have actually left the House a few times. But you talk with some conservative people, about the whole transgender groomer thing, right? You ask them, so you believe that it's grooming for a trans person, or sometimes a homosexual, they can believe that too, to talk about their life or identity around a young person? And they'll say yes. And then you'll say, so grooming an underage person, this is tantamount to child abuse, like pedophilia, yes? And they say, well, yes, because of course, yes, that's what they mean, And then so logically, this extension here, you believe that people in those groups should be arrested just for their identities. And they'll say, whoa, no, 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 no. Whoa, no, 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 no. Hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Whoa! I'm not saying that. And you know what, guys? A lot of them mean it. A lot of them mean it. No, really, a lot of them mean it. A lot of them can't put two and two together. They're really just waiting to be handheld on their way to the next step. But they have to be led from implication to implication. Don't get me wrong, there are people who vote red who legitimately would just, they want gay people to be shot or whatever. There are people like that. But I think the majority of Republicans are passive participants in slaughter. I do. I think a lot of them. It's not that they're fundamentally morally broken, because I don't think there is such a thing as being fundamentally morally broken. I think that they have an understanding of the world that is clouded by cognitive bias, uh, misunderstanding on some very basic empirical things, and a deliberate and trained inability to question facts as they're presented. I guess I'll just ask this. It's just very, very, there is something factual here that can't be questioned. A bunch of Republican leaders came out and said Antifa was responsible for the attack on the Capitol after Jan 6, and now that's been dropped entirely, of course, because Trump has taken credit for it. Like, but it was like an immediate thing. What does it say to you about politicians who, when something happens that makes them look bad, their immediate first tier response is to just completely lie about it, just with no reservation, a baseless lie, a lie with no backing at all, just throw it out there? Or about the January 6th committee, right? Basically all of Trump's inner circle, told him that the claims about election fraud were just fake, but he continues to insist, and the Texas GOP continues to insist. The Texas GOP, that wing of the party, recently put out their little manifesto claiming that they believe Joe Biden's presidency is illegitimate. If these are political positions which are being held in defiance of reality, if nothing can change the minds of these people, then are you not forfeiting the right for your mind being changed, being a part of the steps taken to stop you? Democracies only function if people who vote, people who participate politically, are receptive to reality. If you're not, if you're unashamedly not, what you're essentially saying is, discourse is not a tool that can be used to sway me off bad positions. You will have to use other tools. What other tools do you want people to use on you exactly? How can you expect to convince anyone or even participate politically at all if you can't be swayed off your own positions? It's not possible. It cannot be done. You all agree, don't you? And do you think this is different? The purpose of a democracy is literally to facilitate civil discourse so people with disagreements can form compromises and arrive at conclusions that serve people's interests to the best possible extent. People who cannot be convinced by empirically, factually true things are forfeiting their participation in that process. They're ousting themselves. They're essentially saying, this process is not the mechanism by which I want to hold power. I want to hold power intrinsically. I want my power to come from an authoritarian, non-communal, non-committee driven place. Because democratic processes are something that I'm not receptive to. You get me. You understand perfectly well what I'm saying. Anyway, at this point, I'm just rambling. I think that my language here is a little bit hampered in large part because I don't really believe many Republicans can be moved at this point. I really do think like we need them to be shown the photos. I think what we need, frankly, is mass arrests of all the people for whom we have provable, empirical, undeniable evidence participated in an attack on the democratic process, and they need to be laid to trial. And then, frankly, I just think that the Republican Party should be basically de facto expelled. It is the political party that attempted to coup the country. I don't think that's unreasonable in the slightest. I don't like. Frankly, it's just perfectly straightforward when you just think about it. Like, for a second, allow your mind to be freed of all of the stupid liberal aphorisms and all the cry bullying from the Republicans. Think about it for like 2 seconds. So there's a political party in the country that, with very few exceptions, worked together and reinforced itself in an effort to overturn the democratic process and install a dictator. Huh. Oh, yeah, I guess maybe that should be dispelled, I guess? Yeah, maybe. A little bit. A smidge. Seems reasonable when I say it like that. I mean, that is what happened. And if they want to have a political party, they can just do one that's not, like, fascist. The Democrats would never dare. Yeah, I'm aware. Would that cause a civil war? People being arrested legally for illegal things that they did, following by, like, anti-Republican legislation. Listen, at this point, like, the massive political conflict is essentially inevitable. It's really just a matter of whether or not you want to start on the front foot or the back foot. Would you rather the great conflict begin after they've seized power or preemptively when you're in power? Me personally, I think it's better to have fights when you can win, but